we need to check out as we begin this offseason, the Ravens salary cap situation. And for that, we bring in Brian McFarland. Brian, thank you for joining us. Obviously, it's on a weird time to discuss it, right? The Ravens got knocked out early. Plus, we have this Justin Tucker news. But nonetheless, we do have to cover the salary cap also. How are you? And thank you so much for joining us.
Good. I'm great, Sarah. Thanks for having me on. And as was just said, hope Bobby feels better soon.
Yes. Bobby, I tell you what, Brian, Bobby has been battling this nasty flu since Buffalo.
Yeah.
He tried to come back on Wednesday. I know he wanted to be here with you. But literally, as I was talking to him before the show, he was starting to get those fever chills again. I mean, he can't, he's having a hard time getting over it. I definitely feel for him. So, Brian, just to kind of like as an overview here, I saw that you tweeted the other day. You're giving us good updates every time signings are made. The Ravens, as of I think this was January 28th, had just under $6 million in cap space. Obviously, that's not going to be enough to do offseason business. They will open up more. But from your perspective, knowing that the Ravens have like 80% of their starters under contract for next year, knowing there's $6 million, how would you describe the overall health of their salary cap situation going into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you'd like to have a lot more already, but they do have avenues, whether it's an extension, restructures. They don't have a lot of guys to cut at this point. This year, as past years, it was pretty obvious the candidates. This year, actually, I had to make up some candidates as I'm getting my my story ready, my big article ready, and so that's a little different this year. Although I kind of reluctantly put Tucker in as just one of those guys that I didn't think would happen. Now, obviously, that the complexion of that has certainly changed. So, interestingly, I think for the first time in a long time, it's better for them to create space with extensions than with restructures, because you're looking at the same guys, whether it's Lamar, whether it's Humphrey, whether it's Derrick Henry, guys like that who you'd probably rather extend to create the cap space, because you're going to be able to create roughly equal amounts of cap space, but you have them secured for the future as well. And Lamar's deal next year in 26 becomes a big issue. I think they'd prefer to get out in front of that before they kind of cede a lot of leverage to him, because in 26 his cap number's $75 million. If they simply restructure him this year, that's going to increase that number, which cedes even more leverage to him. And hopefully this time would go a little easier than the last time. I would think it would, because it's only an extension on the present deal. He's obviously going to get paid well. Obviously, I think the specter of fully guaranteed is now fully out the window. But those are things. Derrick Henry would be a perfect. This is the second year of a 2-year deal. Perfect time to add a year or two on. And then spread the money out, and so I think those would be, and same thing with Marlon Humphrey. He's $18 million in cash, gives you a lot of leeway. Again, so you could just restructure it, but an extension would be a good thing there. But if they can't get those deals done, then they're going to have to restructure, and those three, along with Roquan Smith, are probably the biggest candidates for that. Those are the ones that will create space. Obviously, if you re-sign Stanley, that's going to take up space because he's not on next year's cap, really. And then you've got Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum that are now eligible for extensions. My guess is if they get one done, they'll be happy. I don't see them getting two done this year. But that's just a question of which one they can strike a deal with first, probably.
Okay, so let's dive in. You mentioned a lot of good overview stuff that was good. Maybe let's dive in a little bit more. So on the topic of creating space, you said that you were having a hard time finding cap casualties. So here's the list of, I think top 14 or 15 highest paid Ravens. One that's not on this list is Arthur Millette. Maybe he could be one. Is there anybody else that you're like, okay, this is a realistic cap casualty, not a trade, but a cap casualty? Or is there literally nobody on here that you could be like, there's nobody that's a slam dunk, I guess, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, obviously Marcus Williams is. I mean, they already redid the deal earlier this month to.
And Brian, that because they've already done that, they've already received the money they're gonna receive from that, right? Like this $6 million figure that they currently have, that's everything but what comes after June, right?
Correct. That's okay. Yes. So the way they redid Williams' deal, it gave them 9.9 immediately. So without that, they'd be in the hole right now.
Okay.
So that's already factored in. They will get 2.1 after on June 2nd, by virtue of the post June 1 release. So that one, obviously, that's an obvious one. You mentioned Arthur Millette. That's, I believe, 2.25 million. Not huge, but obviously coming off of injuries, younger guys moving forward. The slot spot, assuming they want to keep Humphrey in the slot now, that makes Millette a little, a little less useful, I guess, because he's primarily a slot guy. So I think he's probably a one. Now, maybe they could say, look, you're coming off of injury. We want to cut $1 million off of your cap number, and we'll be happy to, get $1 million instead of 2.25. That's enough for us. And they can bring him back, no guaranteed money. So they could always, cut him after that if he wasn't among the best 53. They're going to have to do something one way or another. Obviously, this is controversial, maybe, but Mark Andrews, last year of his deal, $11 million. I think, 3 weeks ago, nobody would have thought and nobody would have said cut him. Obviously, right. After the playoff game, that changed a lot of people's feelings. One way or another, something was probably going to happen there. Because he likely and Charlie Kohler are all free agents after this coming year. So an extension for whether it's Andrews or whether it's likely, obviously Andrews reducing that cap number would be nice if he's staying. A trade would create 11 million, a release would create 11 million. So, there's a substantial amount there. An extension would not save 11, but you could probably save 6 or so.
If they extended him, does that mean likely is gone next year, or is there an extension that could be, I don't know, somewhat modest to where you could keep likely? Now, again, I know you could always play with other money if you want to restructure Lamar or Roquan or whatever. You could keep both, but in a realistic world, is there a Mark Andrews extension plus a likely extension later for more money and Mark less?
I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, Andrews is only 29, I think.
Yeah.
So he's still pretty young as far as tight ends go. I would think an extension. I would think there's going to be an extension for one or the other. I don't see. I mean, I said it somewhere. I think it was on Twitter at one point. I don't know that either of them wants to be Robin to the other's Batman,
Right.
And I think for likely, especially because he's younger, I think if he hits the free agent market, somebody's going to come with a lot of money. And does he want to take less here to be, tight end, maybe not Batman, Robin, but 1A or 1B, I mean, they're both ones, but or does he want to go out and be the top dog and get 100 who knows 100 passes thrown his direction, so that's not going to happen here. So my guess is it's going to have to be one or the other. It's just a question of how they decide to work that out. Obviously Andrews has been Lamar's, security blanket for a long time, and not that likely can't be, but that's something they're going to have to weigh. And I know Lamar has a say in it, so to speak, but that factor has to factor in, his comfort and, his, he and Andrews always seemingly being on the same page most of the time. Certainly it doesn't always happen, but doesn't with any receiver for sure.
Okay, so if they don't extend Andrews, and I'm just trying to figure this out. So to me, they need money. And an obvious way to do that is to trade Andrews and take out his terrible performance in the divisional round. Take that out. They would still be in this, money, this like
quandary.
Quandary. And so like, if he's not, let's say, traded, and you're saying you can only extend one or the other, I imagine that they would go with the younger guy, which is likely. So if he's, go ahead.
No, go. You got.
I didn't like. Do you agree?
I'm agreeing. Yeah. I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you go with the younger guy? And he has a good rapport with Lamar too. Obviously, it's not for as long of a time, but he's got a good rapport with Lamar too. And so, let's say that they just write it out with Mark. Let's say they just say, okay, we'll keep him on his current salary, and then we'll say goodbye to him, and then we'll extend likely next year. Is Roquan and Marlon, are those two contracts enough to open enough space up with just those two?
I mean, between Roquan, Marlon, and Lamar, if they wanted to just do restructures and no extensions, I believe that number is right around 36 million in cap created.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they could, if they just do restructures. Now, again, I don't know that you want to touch, do you want to touch Roquan coming off of a down year? His numbers are, increasing a lot as well. So do you really want to go there? Lamar and Humphrey, you can create it. And personally, if it was me, I would fix the Lamar situation if it's fixable this year. And get rid of that 75 million number in 2026, flatten that out and create a lot of cap space this year. I'd extend Marlon.
Yeah.
Because it's time. I mean, and that 18 million, you can create a good 10, 11 there. So you could probably create a 10 and 11 for both of those. Maybe not. And then I'd extend Henry. I'd add 2 years to Henry's deal. Maybe, this deal only averaged 8 or 9 million a year.
Yeah.
You could go to probably 12, 13 million a year, maybe.
Wow.
And create about 5 million there. So that's creating 20, 26 million. They're not going to have a big free agent year one way or another, I don't think.
Right.
And then, if you keep Andrews, obviously,
would you keep him or would you try to trade him?
If they are committed to likely as their quarterback for the future, then I think you try and trade Andrews and get that 11 million. It changes the dynamic for sure, but it's not like you're drafting a guy and hoping he's gonna come right in and be plug and play or something like that. You've got a guy you're comfortable with, as you said. Lamar's comfortable with. When it's been one tight end, then it's been likely because Andrews was hurt. Likely had some big games, so it's not like he can't fill that role.
Right. Okay. So going back to Lamar, when you say you want to fix that, you're not talking about a restructure where he doesn't even need to come to the table, because you could just take his cap number and play with it without even, needing to have much negotiations. Like you're talking about, are you talking about a fix like after the Ravens went through 3 years of Flacco and then they redo the contract? That's what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I'm talking about avoiding that, because if they restructure him, that 75 million becomes 80 million next year and 80 million the year after. So, they can restructure. They could go to him and he could say, let's talk next year. And that's the end of it. Okay, so we're going to restructure it because we need that. We're going to have to get that cap space. And, last year they didn't restructure him when I thought they would. And I think, part of my thinking now is because they didn't want to raise that 75 too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because they restructured him last year and they restructure him this year, then that 75 is 85, in 2026. So from a cap perspective, they can create cap space with an extension and fix 26 and 27, and you might have to do this again in 3 years. This is what happens with big, the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger restructured every couple of years, that was just the way. And that's all star veteran quarterbacks with these big numbers. They never really get to those big cap numbers because they just keep pushing it out and pushing it out. And then in the end, you're going to have a bundle of dead money at the end, but you've gotten, your
More
10,
than a decade.
12 years out of your player. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and Lamar's obviously worth every penny. So real quick, before we move on from clearing space, you said fix Lamar, trade Andrews. This is what you would do. Fix Lamar, trade Andrews, Marlin extension, Henry extension. You didn't mention Roquan. Would you leave Roquan alone?
If you can get the other things done, I would leave Roquan alone.
Okay.
Until he comes into camp in great shape next year. And it looks like Roquan of 2 years ago, not Roquan of this past year, because I wouldn't extend him, certainly, and restructuring is just going to make the next 2 years bigger cap numbers, and then you're forced to cut bait when you might not necessarily want to, because it becomes an untenable number. So I would leave him alone. You can have him in your back pocket, so to speak, at the trade deadline. If you need if you need more cap space to acquire somebody, you could always restructure him then, because it's not a full restructure. It's kind of half of the restructure at that point. But it could create the necessary space to bring somebody in. So, and then what kind of shape he's in, how he's been playing for half of a season at that point as well.
And then real quick, just because obviously the Justin Tucker news is everywhere. It's what I addressed before you came on here. There's investigations that have to go down and this and that, but let's just a hypothetical go down the rabbit hole that, there's truth to these allegations and the Ravens need to move on from Justin Tucker. Right here, I have the chart up from Over the Cap. Looks like he'd be $7.5 million in dead money. What would a Justin Tucker cut due to the salary cap beyond that 7.5?
Yeah, I mean, if it came to that, now he has no guaranteed money in his deal anymore, so at least we don't have to worry about that. So that 7.5 is from prior bonuses and restructures. So you can't do anything about that, other than I would assume they would use a post June 1 release on him, like they are on Williams. They have 2 of those that they can use prior to June 1. So that would be number 1 and number 2. That would spread out that dead money. So that would actually create $4.2 million this year. They would not get that cap space until June 2nd.
Right.
But that would be money, they can budget around that, knowing they're going to have that. And that would go towards practice squad and, towards their in-season expenses, so to speak. That would split that 7.5 in dead money over, it would be like 2.9 this year, I think, and 4.6 or something like that in 20. So there would be dead money on the cap next year for it, but as opposed to, because if they cut him without that, then they owe $400,000 more than he actually cost right now. So I would think they would do that. I think that post June 1 would be, it's making the best of a bad situation at that point. And they got to deal with the, cap going up next year, and hopefully, that will help absorb some of that dead money.
So moving on to some of the unrestricted free agents, we were having this conversation on the show yesterday. Ronnie Stanley. I imagine the Ravens would like to have him back after, a comeback year. But my question has been like, well, at what price? So he signed that deal 5 years ago, 5 years, almost $100 million, just underneath that, with an annual salary of $19.75 million. So to me, I feel like the Ravens should at least give him an offer. I don't know what he could get out on the market. I imagine he would want to go test the market. But what would be the appropriate offer to him, given his injury history, but also that he just bounced back and is technically going to the Pro Bowl as an alternate? So what do you think they would have to offer him for it to be competitive for him to return?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because, and you mentioned it, the injury history is substantial.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. He's going to be, I think, 31 next season. So I don't know how he will be viewed around the league. Offensive tackles can play well into their mid-30s in some cases. both Ravens and, or not both, but the Ravens and other teams are going to have to factor in, basically the restructure they did last year. They took this year off the deal and basically put him in a prove it year. So was that motivation something that, may not exist other than it being a prove it year? So all of those have to that all factors into their thinking. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody offers him, because obviously that, as you said, the deal was 5 years ago, prices have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody comes in with an offer right around 20 a year. I don't know that the Ravens will go there. Obviously last year they already tried to go younger on the line. You've got Lamar's contract going up. Even if they do extend him, it's still, going to be bigger cap numbers over time. Do you want to do a 3-year, $60 million deal? And you could structure it so that it's not going to be 20 in the first year cap number for sure. But I have a sneaking suspicion that he will not be on the team next year. I just think someone will offer him more than the Ravens are going to be willing to go now. And, a lot of this factors in, do they feel that Rosengarten can move over and be left tackle next year? That's a huge question they have, because if they feel yes, then it's easier to find a right tackle a little later in the draft, just like they did with Rosengarten. He was 3rd round. So, he
was the 10th overall tackle. So I imagine the depth there is going to mean something to them too, being number 27. So
yeah. So, that's, and I haven't looked at the draft much, as far as how deep that factors in as well, how deep the tackle pool is, the class is this year. But I think they're going to, I think they're going to have their price. They're going to say, hey, Ronnie, this is where we are. If you want it, great, we'll sign you today. If not, if you think you can get more, go out in the market and see what you can get and come check back with us. But usually that check back with us means if you're getting more somewhere else, then, we're going to say, thanks for your service. We would love to have you back, but we can't go there.
So do you think the Ravens, so you're saying you're not sure they could get to 20 million, right? That's like a gray area. So to me, I was going to ask you about the transition tag, but the transition will be between 22 and 23. So if they won't go to 20, I don't think they would use the transition tag. What do you think they would offer 18 and say, go find something better if you can?
Yeah, 17, 18,
17,
I
18.
would think. And I think the injury history is the biggest factor here.
Right.
Because obviously we saw what happened with the last deal, and, they didn't get their money's worth out of that. And are they going to be willing to take that chance again? I thought about the transition tag too, but that's a 1-year deal at 20 plus million.
Yeah.
If they did go to 20 million for, let's say again, 3 years, or add a void year or two at the end, just to, spread some of the money out, they can probably get a first year cap number of 12 million, let's just say. So that's a lot more workable than a transit. That's far, better option than if they're going to go there than a transition tag, other than the transition tag is 1 year and you don't have any obligations if it fails miserably. Whereas a longer term deal, there'll probably be some more guaranteed money or dead money in the future, where the transition tag, it's all in 1 year and there wouldn't be any future cap implications if it didn't work out.
So I had kind of felt like if the Ravens were able to re-sign Ronnie Stanley, that Patrick McCary would for sure be out. But if your suspicion that they won't be able to get Stanley back is correct, do you see McCary also leaving, or do you see them being like, well, now we for sure got to get McCary because he's at least a backup. He's played backup tackle before. You could maybe move Roger. Do you think that increases the chances of McCary coming back if Stanley's gone?
Yeah, I think again, they've seemingly and they kind of mentioned it. DaCosta, I believe, was the one who mentioned it about, they made a concerted effort to go younger.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I have a feeling, if they get McCary, again, whatever that right price is, I think they would bring him back. I don't think I mean, he played so at guard this year. I don't think left tackle is a place you really want him anymore, at his age.
Right.
So I would think, I mean, I think Josh Johnson would be the guy that, if they're going to bring somebody back to be the backup left tackle, I would think it would be him. Now, obviously it depends, if they moved Rosengarten over and then drafted a right tackle, is that a guy that could also play left tackle as well? So if something happened to Rosengarten, you switch him over, and then I have a feeling McCarry's gone too. I just
okay. So you see both of them. You see a world where they're both moving on.
I do. I mean, we've seen, we didn't think Ben Powers was worth as much as he got. We didn't think John Simpson was worth as much as he got. So
we'll see what Ben Cleveland gets.
Right. Well, he didn't even
with no wear and tear.
So who knows? He's going to get more than they're going to offer, clearly. But so those were guys that were starters that they ended up letting walk because they got more than I think anybody was expecting. I think Ravens fans were thinking we can get them back, but then the offers they got elsewhere. So whether now McCurry's older than those guys,
right?
So that might be a little different proposition than those guys, but I just have a feeling. I'm feeling there's a good chance that both of them are gone and they go younger. And then, because again, you've got big cap numbers with other players. And I mean, it's, you got, I don't know, they'll draft somebody really high. I'm sure they've got 11 picks. So I'm sure there's going to be at least one tackle and at least one interior guy there, maybe two tackles, who knows, depending upon how free agency plays out.
Absolutely. Okay, but Pat Ricard's coming back, right?
Well, that one I feel pretty strongly, because there just aren't that many teams that use him, use fullbacks like that. And the one team I'd be most worried about is the Chargers, but they have their own Pat McCarry. And I'm sorry, they have their own Pat Ricard. Yeah. A guy that was also a defensive lineman that they turned into a fullback. So he's not as good as Ricard, but I think they're probably, that's their guy. So I don't think they'd be a concern.
And Ardarius Washington, a restricted free agent, so they have him for 2025. Do you think that they would try to extend him early to get a good deal for a couple more years?
Yeah, that's a guy. I mean, that's a guy. Whether it was Geno Stone, whether it was Chuck Clark, those were guys that they extended early. Not a lot of years. Washington, and that's a place they could probably save some cap space. Washington is an undrafted free agent. If you give him the low restricted free agent tender, you can match the deal and offer, but there's no draft pick compensation coming back. So it makes it easier for a team to make an offer. And if they, if the Ravens match, we don't have to give up a pick at any point. So my guess is they would use the second round of restricted free agent tender. So that if somebody did sign with an offer sheet and he declined, the Ravens will get a second round pick back. I don't think anybody's going to trade a second round pick for Ardarius Washington. So right. I think that pretty much secures him. That does come with a 5-point. We don't know what the cap is yet, but based on estimates, if the cap comes where we think it is, that's going to be like a $5.3 million salary. An extension could probably drop that number $1 million or $2 million. Yeah. Which would be more ideal. So, obviously all these discussions are, you got to make the deal, it takes both sides, be willing and find that middle ground. So, extensions would be the best for all of these guys.
Right.
But if not, then it's going to have to be some restructures instead. But Washington would certainly be a guy that it would behoove them not just to lower that cap number, but obviously to secure him beyond next year.
All right, I'll get you out of here with this question. You mentioned that the Ravens will try to get either one of Kyle Hamilton or Tyler Linderbaum an extension done early. Do you have a prediction of which one would be the better one to go first? I don't know, maybe because you have Kyle Hamilton for that fifth-year option. I don't know if that changes things, but which one would you attack first?
Yeah, I mean, the only variable there, I mean, I think that it would be Hamilton just to get him secured. That said, the fifth-year option is cheaper for Hamilton than it is for Linderbaum. So if you have to play one of them in 26 on the fifth-year option, you'd probably rather it be Hamilton, because the fifth-year option number is based on just safeties for Hamilton, where it's based on all offensive linemen. for Linderbaum, and that means centers are usually the cheapest paid, but you got everybody thrown in, and tackles are obviously highly paid. So from that sense, it would make sense to, if you can only get one done, and ideally they get one done this offseason, they get one done next year, because you don't want them to have to play on the 20+ million 1 year, basically 1 year deal at that point. You want that long-term deal. So if they feel they can get both of them done, it probably doesn't matter. But if they get one done now and one done next year. But if you want to look at, the variable of leverage, I guess we'll say, then getting Linderbaum done sooner, because that's a bigger number, which sometimes makes it harder to get a deal done, even though he's a center. I don't say that as, it's putting him down in any way,
I know
but
what you're
the
saying.
numbers are the numbers,
Yeah, no, when your average salary is based off of all offensive line, and there's tackles in there who are one of the most expensive positions, that makes sense. So Brian McFarland, thank you so much for joining us inside the vault. For those that don't follow him, I don't know why you're sitting under a rock. Go over to him on Twitter at Ravens Salary Cap. You can go over to Russell Street Report. He posted his 2025 Ravens roster preview. Brian, is there anything else you want to plug or anything coming up?
Yeah, soon enough. That was just kind of that roster preview, is just to get that kind of those facts out there. My big preview article, which breaks down all the cuts, extensions, the numbers, things like that. Working on that now. That's kind of a behemoth. So I hope to have that out at worst right after the Super Bowl. Hopefully I can get it out next week before, but it is a bit involved. It's long. So and sometimes my brain just isn't there to get back to it, but I'm working on it. It's already started. So so hopefully we'll get that out soon, but certainly the Monday after the Super Bowl at the latest. So
perfect. I'll be honest. I'm excited for that, because when I was getting ready to have you on, I was like, I got to go he always has this annual cut/trade chart. And I refer to it maybe 36 times throughout the off season. And I was like, oh, he doesn't have it yet. So you let me know that it could be coming.
It'll
either
be coming,
before or after the Super Bowl. That's good news to me. So thank you. Thank you for
Sure.
all your work. Everybody, he is the guru Ravens salary cap go-to. Go check him out on Twitter and at Russell Street Report. Brian, have a great day. Appreciate you.
You too. Have a great weekend. Thanks for having me on.